Welcome, Thespians.
Welcome. Welcome to our series on all things dealing with thespian.
Theater, it's a rich, wide, varied world, and there's a lot to talk about, but we're going to break it down into little sort of bite-sized chunks.
And we will also include some things that deal with film and TV since there's such a related area. In our first series, our first episode, we have about audience etiquette.
So most of us will spend most of our time in the theater in the audience. And there are some things that are helpful to know before you go to a performance and are part of an audience that'll help you enjoy the experience and also make sure everybody else does too.
Greetings, Thespians! Today we're going to talk about a really important aspect of the theater, potentially the most important group of people that is involved in any performance of a play, and that is the audience. And you may be thinking, what's so important about the audience? Well, without an audience, everything we do on stage is honestly pretty silly. And most of us are going to interact with theater the most frequently as part of an audience. So it's really important that we all understand what is expected of the people in the audience at a live performance. So first of all, really, really important thing that you need to do is be on time. Now, does it really matter if you're a couple of minutes late? Actually, it does. Because the thing about theater that's different from a movie or a sporting event, things like that, is that we're all in one room together. And by we, I don't just mean the other audience members. I mean the actors, the crew, even people you can't see. We're all affected by what happens and what everybody else in the room does. So when you're on time and you're in your seat and you're ready from the very beginning, then there's less movement in the audience, there's less noise, and you get to see everything from the very, very start. So when you're thinking about when you need to leave to be on time for a show, make sure that you don't just think about your travel time, your driving time, or how long it's going to take on public transportation to get from A to B. You also have to think about things like parking, walking into the theater, getting your tickets if you still need to do that, finding your seat. So make sure to factor all that time in. Usually most plays, the house opens or the seating is available to the audience half an hour before the start of the show. So that's a really good point in time to plan to arrive at the theater, is 30 minutes before the curtain. That gives you plenty of time in case there are snags, traffic jams, things, problems you run into. But even if you don't run into any problems, you're there with plenty of time to spare before the show starts. Now, once the show starts, it's really helpful for everybody, your fellow audience members, the folks on stage and backstage, if you stay in your seat. Any type of movement, whether you are coming in late or just decide you need to use the restroom or step out for some other reason, any amount of movement can be really distracting to the people around you, maybe even the people on stage. So it really is best if you try to stay seated and still for the duration of the show. That can be a really long time. That's why we plan in intermissions. So there's usually an intermission at the halfway point of most shows to have a chance to stretch your legs, use the restroom, make a phone call if needed. While we're talking about phones, most of us have a phone that we keep on us all the time. Okay? We don't like being disconnected. We like people being able to get in touch with us, and we get in touch with them. And that's great. And people coming to the theater are no different. However, those phones can be really distracting and really disruptive to a show. So if you have your phone with you, make sure it's on silent or turned off during the performance. And even if it's on silent, keep it put away. Don't use it, because even notifications coming through, you checking something real quick, lights up the screen, and that light, especially in a dark theater, is really, really disruptive. Another thing a lot of us like to use our phones for is to take photos and record videos. And in the theater, that's a big no-no. Everything that you see on stage, the words that the actors are saying, the costumes they're wearing, the scenery around them, all of it is copyrighted. And so you taking an unauthorized photo or video is actually copyright infringement. So we definitely are not allowed to take videos or photos, as tempting as it may be, because what we're seeing is so spectacular. It is against the rules and against the law. So keep that phone put away, as tempting as it may be to record. Another thing that can be really tempting to do, especially if you're going to see a musical, is singing along. I will admit, this is one thing I personally struggle with, because I love musicals and I love to listen to the soundtracks, which mean I learn all the words before I ever step into the theater, and then I want to sing along. But the people around me did not pay their money and come to see Wicked on Broadway to hear some yahoo sing Defying Gravity. So, as tempting as it is, please control that impulse and do not sing along. Also, conversation should be kept to a minimum. Actually, it should be saved for intermission and after the show. We like to chat with the folks around us and talk about what we're seeing and experiencing at the theater. And it is a communal experience, but talking about it during the show while the actors are doing their thing is not the time or place. So save those conversations for intermission and after the show. Now, one aspect that most people may not think about right off the bat is who comes to the theater, particularly little kids. I, for one, am a huge advocate for exposing children to the arts at a very young age. However, live theater is not always a great experience for really young children, in a lot of ways. Okay, for one thing, it's usually pretty long. A lot of full-length plays and musicals are 2 hours or longer. And even though there's an intermission, even just an hour, that's a really long time to expect a young child to sit still and be quiet and pay attention to anything. Also, not all theater is family friendly. There are plays out there that aren't great for small children, that have language or content or images that might be scary or in another way inappropriate for a small child. So if you have a young child in your life and you think, I want to expose them to theater from a young age, do a little bit of research before you decide what to take them to see. See if you can find out about content, running time, and then make your decision about whether or not a particular show is a good choice for your child or the child in your life to see. Some theater is great for children. Disney on Ice, Sesame Street Live, Paw Patrol Live, those are all intended for young audiences. And those can be great experiences for them. But even shows that we think about being family friendly, like The Lion King. It's a beautiful musical, but it's kind of intense. It has some moments that are a little scary. And so maybe the youngest children should wait a little bit before they go see that. Some theaters actually do have limitations on the ages of their audience and say no children under a certain age will be admitted. So that's something that you need to look into as well if you have young children in your family that you're considering taking to the theater. It can seem like a lot of rules, lots of do's and don'ts apply to going to the theater, but really all you need to think about and all you need to be concerned with are these: respect for the other people in the audience with you, respect for the actors and the artists doing their work on stage, keeping in mind that everybody can see and hear everything. And so if you treat the people in the room with you with respect for what they're doing and the work that they're doing, then you're going to be fine. And also follow the posted guidelines of the theater. Every theater is a little bit different on what they do and don't allow, how they do and don't apply rules. Different shows might have different expectations for things like audience participation. So they're going to communicate that to you. So just follow posted or announced guidelines that an individual theater might share with you. Otherwise, go to the show, go to the theater, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
It's not recording. Hold on. There we go. And action.
In theater today, clapping and cheering are common forms of acceptance for our audiences. Rarely do you hear booing or other verbal forms of disapproval. The exception would be in a children's show or a melodrama or other type of show that lends itself to booing the bad guy. But this hasn't always been the case. In ancient Greece, jeering and theater went hand in hand. To show your thoughts, whether positive or negative, was not only accepted, it was a duty. Fortunately, it wasn't quite as bad for the actors in theater as it was for the gladiators that got booed and, well, fed to the lions. In 1747, in Dublin, Ireland, newly applied guidelines prohibited audiences from going on stage. This didn't stop a drunken college student named Edward Kelly from hopping on stage at the Smock Alley Theater. That was bad enough, but then he went a step further. Kelly made his way backstage and reportedly assaulted an actress, but was punched and thrown out by the theater manager, Thomas Sheridan. The next night, Kelly and several of his friends came back to the theater to teach them a lesson for throwing him out. This incited a riot that tore up the interior of the theater. The incident is now known as the Kelly Riots of 1747. 54 years later, also in London, 1809, the Old Price Riots took place at the Covent Garden Theatre. What started the commotion that led to the riots was the price of tickets going up by $1. This was done to cover the rebuilding costs following a fire. So on opening night, audiences responded by taking part in a little rioting. Theater manager John Philip Kimball tried to quiet the disturbance with the help of police and even a squad of professional boxers. It wasn't until he agreed to bring the prices back down that the riots ended. They only lasted 64 days. America has seen its share of audience incidences as well. In 1849 in New York City at the Astor Place Theater, a disagreement broke out over which performer was the better Shakespearean actor, America's Edwin Forrest or England's William Charles Macready. The dispute ended up with a clash between a group of citizens and an armed police force. A group of Forrest fans purchased tickets to the Macready performance at the Astor Palace Theater and interrupted the show by throwing vegetables, eggs, and even the theater seats on the stage.
I hope you enjoyed this episode on audience etiquette. Again, this does not cover every aspect. We just highlighted the most important ones. And stay tuned for our next episode, which will be on actors etiquette.